Thanks for joining us for part 3 of the Churny Shamrock wall hanging quilt. And today we're going to be working on churn dash blocks.
The next block that we're going to make helps the Churny Shamrock block get its name. These are going to be the churn dash blocks. And I love these little churn dash blocks. I thought that they're so cute. They're just so versatile and they go in with lots of different quilts. And so what we're going to need to make the churn dash block, I have chosen for these to have a light green background that I'm going to use. And I've only used this light green in the 3 Shamrock or the 3 churn dash blocks that go into the Shamrock center. So this is just a lighter green. I have not used this green any other place. I just saved it so that it pops those churn dash blocks there in the center. So to make this unit, we are going to cut some background squares. And I'm just going to tell you what you need to make 1 churn dash blocks, but you will need 3 total churn dash blocks for the quilt. So we're going to cut a 2.5-inch piece from our background, and we're going to make that a 2.5-inch square, and I'm going to cut 2 of those. And again, this is just for 1 block. So here's my background pieces, and then I'm going to cut 2.5-inch squares of a print fabric, and I need 2 pieces of those. And for this, I have chosen to use the same green print within this churn dash block. So each churn dash will be the same green print. I just think it kind of makes it stand off a little bit more as being a different block as opposed to using all different greens. But feel free to, it's your quilt, you make it how you want to make it. And I'm going to put these right sides together. I'm going to draw a diagonal line, and we're going to turn these into 2-inch half square triangle units, just like we did on the other block. So we're going to mark a diagonal line on the center, and make sure that's lined up right. Okay, so we have 2 of those that we're going to use in the block. And then we're going to continue to cut some more pieces. And what we're going to need to complete our churn dash are 4 pieces that measure 1.5 by 2 inch of each fabric. So the dark green fabric, I need 4 pieces, and the light green fabric, I need 4 pieces. So these again are going to measure 1 1/4 inches by 2 inches. And so I can get that out of this little piece. And I need 4, so there's 1. 2, and I'm just going to toss these. And on this piece here, I'm going to cut a 2-inch first. And then I'm going to subcut that into sections that are 1 1/4 inch wide, so that I have 4 pieces of my dark green color, and I can set that aside. And then I need 4 pieces of my background, and in this case again I'm using the light green as the background for this block. And so I'm going to cut that 2 inches first, and then when I make these cuts at 1 1/4 inch, they will already be the right size on the other side. So I can get 3 out of that little piece, and then I'm going to cut another piece out of this scrap, and that's going to measure 2 inches. We'll give that a little slice, put that aside. I'm going to clean up one edge here so that I know that I'm working with a square edge when I start. And so then I need 1 more piece that measures 2 inches by 1 1/4. So I can cut that there. So now I have 4 of these. And then the last piece that I'm going to need of the background is a center piece, and it's going to be a 2-inch square. So I can cut that from that same piece. So now we're ready to go ahead and sew these together. And the first thing that I'll do is sew my half square triangle units, and then we'll sew our other subunits together. So let's go to the sewing machine. Okay, at the sewing machine, the first thing I'm going to do is to take and make my half square triangle units. And so I have 2 of those, and I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch on each side of that drawn line, and do both sides of this one. I'm going to add this one next. Flip all those around and come back through and do that last side. Okay, and then I'm going to cut my threads apart. And then now I'm going to go cut that, and so then I'll have 4 units that look like this, and I'm going to trim them down so they're 2 inches square. And okay, I've got my half square triangle units all completed. They're at scaled down, or I cut them down to 2 inches. So we'll set those aside for now, along with our center square. And now we're going to pair up these 1 1/4 by 2 inch pieces. We're going to sew a dark green to a light green, and we have 4 of those to do. So let's line that up. And I'm lining up the whole piece there. And a 1/4 inch seam. And we're just going to do all 4 of those. Okay, get them lined up. Okay, and the last one here. Now, when I am kind of chain piecing, or my version of chain piecing, I like to have my needle down when I stop a seam. I like to sew a few inches, that would be a lot, do not do that, a few stitches just past the pieces that I'm joining, and then I stop when I'm ready to add my next piece. I try to get it in there close to the needle. I've got my presser foot not pushing down quite so hard. I can adjust the pressure on this machine so I have it a little bit floating, and I like to place my unit that I'm ready to sew in there not quite to the needle, so that when I start stitching I may have 1 stitch before it gets to the fabric. And so what that kind of does is it keeps those little stitches, they're locked outside of the fabric, and it just kind of holds them together a little bit better. I just found that that works easiest for me. So when I start stitching, that one went right into the fabric, and that's totally fine. So I'm going to cut these apart. And I guess the reason there that you can kind of see is I do leave little tails hanging after I chain piece them. I cut them apart in the center, so I have little pieces hanging on each end. And if the stitch is locked together before it gets into the fabric, it's just going to keep it held together that much longer. I won't have my seams popping open at the edges. I just found that sometimes that's helpful when I'm doing these kind of things. And I'm going to go ahead and go press these all so that I'm going to open it up and press so that all my seams are pressed towards the darker green fabric. So I'll go do that quickly. Okay, we got those pressed, and now we can lay out our churn dash block. And so how we do that is we have our light green, or our background square, in the center, and then I'm going to place the dark green of our 2 fabric unit right next to the center, like that. Then I'm going to come back through with a half square triangle on each one of the corners and put it so that the dark green is facing in towards the center, So like that, and they're not pressed super flat. I just did it real quickly. But you can kind of see the start of our churn dash block. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to join these together and press them, and then add the last side. So then we'll have this row, this row, this row sewn together, and then we'll join those rows into our block. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick up the first one, and I'm going to line up all edges of my piece. And when I'm starting the seam, sometimes I use a little piece of fabric, like a scrap piece, to do a few stitches on just to kind of hold it in place. But right now I'm going to go ahead and I just push my fabric in there. So again, I can get about 1 stitch into the machine, like before it goes into the fabric, and then complete my seam using a 1/4 inch. And now some machines do not like that. They don't like when you stitch on air. They want fabric to be underneath there. So just, you know, be advised, if your machine doesn't like it, it's not something you have to do. It's just kind of how I've been able to piece nicely on this machine. It just seems to work out. Here again, I'm lining up the unit, and these are not quite exactly the same size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of split the difference. I'm going to put it so that the same amount is showing, so that they're centered within each other. And then the piece that's a little bit longer, that's the edge where I'm going to use to sew my 1/4 inch seam. Then I know when I open that up, the unit, stitched unit, is the size I need it to be. If I just matched up those 2 edges and then I open it up, my unit is going to get smaller than what I need it to be, because I didn't have smaller or bigger, just because I didn't start with an exact 2 inch square. So that's kind of my cheat way of doing it to get my squares to come out more the right size. I still have a good bit in that seam allowance. It's like a thread of the fabric that's hanging over, but then I know that they're going to line up a little bit better. So I'm just going to kind of finger press these units open and lay them back on. Now I am going to kind of try to press so that these seams will nest when I sew them together. So that one goes that way. I'm going to turn this one this way. Actually, this is the bottom piece. Takes me a minute. Okay, and we'll open this one up, and this one goes on top, and it's going to go this way. Okay, lay that back into position, and now I'm going to add the other side on. Okay, and I'm kind of just lining up my pieces. And get that center row, get it lined up. And the last one, get that sewn on. Okay, and then I will cut those apart, and it's going to be cute. All right, I'm going to go press these, and then I'll meet you back here. And okay, so when I pressed these, I pressed my center row so that the seams are going into the center block. And then on my 2 outer rows, I press them so that the seams are going towards the half square or the end units. And that way, when I sew them together, they'll all nest. So I'm just going to pick up a piece, nest these seams. And again, if you like to pin and feel more comfortable with that, please go ahead and do that. And I kind of just line it up as I'm going along here. Okay, looks good. We'll add on that next piece, and we'll give it a final press and see what it looks like. Okay. looks good. It'll look even better when it's pressed. So let's go do that and we'll take. Okay, so there is my churn dash unit. It's going to measure 5 inches before I sew it into the quilt, and I'll need to make 3 of these. And again, I'm going to use the same light colored green as the background in the other 2 blocks, but I'll choose a different outside brighter green so that you can really see that little churn dash block. So we'll need 3 of these for our shamrock.